Part 1. The Boy. Peter the Great was born on June 9, 1672, in the Russian capital of Moscow. Peter was the 14th son of his father, Tsar Alexei, and the first with his second wife, Natalia Naryshkina. Moscow celebrated Peter's birth with church bells, cannon fire, and feasts. The Kremlin held a big party with sugar sculptures and bright decorations. Peter had two older half-brothers, Fyodor and Ivan. Their mother, Maria Miloslavskaya, was Alexei's first wife. Because Maria had been married to the Tsar, her family, the Miloslavskis, lived in wealth and comfort. But when Maria died in 1669, people grew worried. Fyodor was always sick, and Ivan had serious health problems, both physical and mental. Many hoped Alexei would marry again and have healthier children. After Maria's death, Alexei felt sad and alone. He found comfort in his close friend, Artemon Matveyev. Matveyev was different from many in Moscow. He enjoyed reading, science, and ideas from Western Europe. He lived with his Scottish wife, who wore Western clothes and followed European customs, and their home in Moscow's German quarter was full of music, art, and conversation. Natalia Naryshkina grew up in Matveyev's home. She was smart, kind, and well-spoken. One day, while visiting Matveyev, Alexei met her. They soon married on February 1st, 1671. After the wedding, the Naryshkin family now had more influence, and Matveyev became an even more important figure. This change, however, caused tension with the Miloslavsky family. Peter was a smart and active child. He started walking at just 7 months. His father often took him around Moscow and nearby villages. Peter had a happy childhood, but things changed in 1676 when Alexei died. After Alexei died, his oldest son Fyodor became Tsar. Fyodor was kind to Peter and Natalia. But Fyodor's relatives, the Miloslavskis, quickly took control of the court. They did not trust Natalia's family. They arrested Matveyev and exiled him. With Matveyev gone, Natalia and Peter lost power. Still, they stayed in the Kremlin. Fyodor ruled from his bed because he was always sick. Even so, he made an important change. At the time, the top jobs in the government and army went to boyars, Russian nobles, based only on their family name, not skill. This caused arguments over promotions and left talented people behind. Fyodor called the system unfair and destroyed the records that dictated who got what jobs. From then on, people could earn better positions through merit and ability, not just birth. Fyodor died in 1682. He had no children, so the throne had to pass to someone else. Two choices remained: his younger 10-year-old half-brother Peter, or his older 15-year-old brother Ivan. Since Ivan was older, he had the stronger claim to the throne. But, as mentioned before, Ivan had serious health issues and could not rule well. Peter, in contrast, was healthy, curious, and full of energy. The boyars could not agree on who to choose. Some supported Peter, while others backed Ivan. So they called a meeting, the Zemsky Sobor, to decide. In the end, they chose Peter to be Tsar. Since he was still a boy, his mother Natalia and her advisor Matveyev would rule for him until he was of age. While Fyodor was dying, a group of elite soldiers called the Streltsy said their pay was being stolen. When the musketeer office responsible for their pay punished them instead of helping, the Streltsy got angry and fought back. After Fyodor's death, Peter was named the new Tsar. But his half-sister Sophia disagreed. She said their older brother, Ivan, should rule instead. On May 7th, Peter's uncle, Ivan Nershkin, became a boyar. Sophia and her Miloslavsky allies spread a false rumor that he planned to kill Ivan. The Streltsy believed it. A respected general, Prince Ivan Khovansky, supported Sophia, which made the lie seem even more real. Natalia showed that both boys were safe to the growing mob of Streltsy, but it was too late. The Streltsy stormed the Kremlin. They killed the late Fyodor's supporters, including Matveyev, and ransacked their offices and apartments. The Red Square was turned into a gory slaughterhouse. Peter, still a child, saw the massacre unfold before his eyes and never forgot it. By mid-May, the Streltsy had chosen Khovansky as their leader. Sophia took control as Russia's regent. She agreed that both Ivan and Peter would share the throne as co-tsars, but as regent, she made most of their decisions. But when the Streltsy wanted Sophia to support a religious group called the Old Believers, she said no. To trick Khovansky, Sophia left Moscow with the co-tsars, making it look like he was now in charge. But she returned in September, arrested Khovansky, and had him executed. With Khovansky gone, the Streltsy gave up. Sophia stayed in power and ruled Russia for the next several years. Life in Sophia's Kremlin grew tense and controlling, so Natalia took young Peter to the countryside, to a quiet village called Preobrazhensko. It had open fields, forests, and a calm river. Here, Peter was largely free from his responsibilities as co-tsar. He played, explored, and learned by trying things himself, though at the expense of a proper education. Peter found that he loved war games. He brought in hundreds of other boys to fight them, sons of boyars, workers, and even servants. One of them, Alexander Menshikov, was a stable boy who became Peter's closest friend. Peter created two pretend army regiments, the Preobrazhensky and Semyonovsky regiments. They wore real uniforms, used real weapons and cannons with live ammunition, and trained like real soldiers. They lived in barracks and followed strict rules. Experts from Moscow's German quarter helped them learn real military skills. Peter also picked up hands-on crafts like blacksmithing and woodworking. One day, he heard about a sextant, a tool that helps measure distances. He got one but did not know how to use it. So he found a Dutchman named Frans Timmerman, who taught him math, geography, and how the sextant worked. Timmerman became a friend and a mentor to the Tsar. Together, they fixed up old boats. Soon, Peter was building a small fleet of Dutch-style ships on Lake Plejstev. While Peter explored and learned, Sophia's rule began to fall apart. In 1689, she joined Poland-Lithuania in a war against the Ottoman Empire. She sent her trusted general and lover, Vasily Golitsyn, to fight the Crimean Tatars, vassals of the Ottomans. His 2 campaigns failed miserably, however. Thousands of soldiers died from disease and hunger. As her power slipped away, Sophia accused Peter of plotting against her. She tried to take control for herself. Peter fled to the fortified Trinity Monastery and called on his 2 loyal regiments. Support for him grew quickly, and Sophia was removed from power and locked in a convent. Golitsyn was sent into exile in the far north. Part 2: The Apprentice. By the time Sophia lost power, Peter was 17. He was healthy and strong, standing at a towering 6'8". His mother Natalia and others thought it was time for him to marry and have a son to continue the Romanov dynasty. Natalia chose Eudoxia Lubokina, a quiet and religious woman from a strict family. The marriage was cold and loveless, but in 1690, their son Alexei was born. As a young adult, Peter threw wild parties with his close friends, calling their group the all-joking, all-drunken synod of fools and jesters. They dressed in costumes, drank heavily, and acted out silly religious scenes, giving each other obscene titles such as Archdeacon Thrust the Prick and Archdeacon Fuck Off. During this time, Peter met Anna Mons and made her his mistress, replacing Eudoxia in bed. Peter had endless energy. He could drink all night and would still work hard the next day. His parties were full of music, fireworks, sleigh rides, and even people dressed as animals riding through Moscow. But these parties were more than fun. Peter used them to award loyalty, punish mistakes, and keep control over his men. He used jokes, alcohol, and even violence to manage them. He often hit friends when excited or angry, and would jail or torture anyone who betrayed him. Many Russians were shocked by his behavior. Some thought he was wicked, or the Antichrist. He ignored his wife's family, and even allowed the torture of her uncle. Only his mother dared to oppose him. When she died in 1694, Peter mourned, but soon turned his focus to preparing for war. Peter spent the early summer of 1695 sailing near Russia's northern port of Arkhangelsk, dreaming of bigger things. There, he talked with English and Dutch traders about trade with Persia and India. That winter, Peter chose to attack Azov, a Turkish fortress on the Black Sea. If he captured Azov, Russia would have a warm water port that stayed open all year, unlike Arkhangelsk. It would also give Russia a firm base to build its own navy. In June, Peter organized two armies. His own army, made up of 31,000 of his best troops and officers, moved down the Don River. A second, more outdated army of 120,000, led by Boris Sheremetev, moved down the Dnieper River to distract the Crimean Tatars. Travel was slow because of bad roads and poor boats, but they reached Azov by June. The siege lasted 14 weeks. Russian supplies ran low, soldiers argued, and their engineers made mistakes. The Tatars sneaked supplies into the city, and 20 Turkish ships arrived with more troops. After two failed attacks, Peter gave up in October. Peter tried to hold a fake victory parade in Moscow, but few were fooled. In February 1696, Tsar Ivan died. Peter now ruled alone as Russia's sole Tsar, though little changed. He rebuilt his army and navy at Voronezh to prepare for a new invasion. By May 1697, they reached Azov again. Austrian siege engineers came to help, and after a surprise Cossack attack, the Turks surrendered in July. The Russians turned Azov into a proper Russian city, and also built a new harbor at nearby Taganrog to house Russia's first real navy. To build a strong navy, Peter sent over 50 young noblemen to Europe. 28 went to Venice to learn about galleys, small maneuverable warships. The others went to the Netherlands and England to study large sailing ships. They had to learn maps, tools like compasses and sextants, shipbuilding, and even work as regular sailors. No one could come home without a certificate showing that they had learned these skills. Peter had even bigger plans. 2 weeks later, he launched the Grand Embassy, sending over 250 people to Western Europe. They needed to find sailors, engineers, and shipbuilders to help Russia. They also hoped to rebuild the Holy League against the Ottoman Empire. Peter secretly joined the trip, using the fake name Peter Mikhailov. Everyone knew it was really him, but saying it out loud was punished by death. On March 20th, 1697, the embassy set out and crossed into Swedish lands at Riga, where they were treated coldly. Peter studied Riga's strong modern forts, but was ordered to leave. In contrast, they were welcomed warmly in Courland, then traveled to Königsberg and made an alliance with Frederick III, the Elector of Brandenburg. By August, the embassy was in Zaandam, in the Dutch Republic, where Peter worked at a shipyard. In Amsterdam, he attended autopsies and bought surgical tools to pull teeth or perform minor surgeries on his staff if they needed it. They quickly grew afraid to tell him about their aches. In January 1698, Peter arrived in London, the largest city in Western Europe. He met King William III, who was ruler of both England and the Dutch Republic. While in England, Peter watched a session of Parliament from a hidden window, and took a liking to William Penn and the Quakers. He also became inspired by the English Royal Mint and their coinage, hoping to bring the techniques back to Russia. After a short stop in Amsterdam, the Grand Embassy left in May. they passed through Leipzig, Dresden, and Prague. In Dresden, Peter got a royal welcome from Augustus II, the King of Poland-Lithuania and Elector of Saxony. Peter enjoyed the city's museums and partied before heading off. Peter then visited Vienna and met the Holy Roman Emperor, Leopold. As a deeply religious man, Leopold hoped to convert Peter to Catholicism. Peter went to church and met a cardinal, but made it clear he would not change his religion. The embassy ultimately failed to convince Austria to fight the Ottomans again. Peter planned to visit Venice, but got urgent news. The Streltsy had revolted in Moscow a second time. He ordered harsh action to crush the revolt. By the time he reached Krakow, he learned the revolt had ended. He decided to skip Venice and met Augustus again to strengthen their friendship. The King of Sweden, Charles XI, had died in 1697, leaving his inexperienced teenage son to inherit. Augustus and Peter agreed to join Denmark to attack Sweden. Looking to regain land they all lost to Sweden in the past century. After 18 months and spending 2.5 million rubles, Peter returned to Moscow on September 5, 1698. Though he failed to rebuild the Holy League, he learned much about Europe's advances, and had brought back hundreds of skilled workers from the West. Peter decided to force Russia to modernize, whether it wanted to or not. When Peter returned to Russia, one of the first things he did was deal with the Streltsy. They hated how Peter favored his new Western-style army, and how he ordered the Streltsy to go on grueling forced marches to guard Russia's vast frontiers. While Peter was away on his grand embassy, rumors spread that he had left the Orthodox Church, or even died. Many Streltsy decided Peter was no longer the true Tsar, and planned to bring back the old ways. When the rebellion began, Peter's Scottish general, Patrick Gordon, led troops and violently put down the Streltsy. Those who survived faced harsh punishment. Even Peter's wife, Eudoxia, supported the rebels. After a fierce 4-hour argument upon his return, Peter forced her to become a nun. She refused, wanting to stay and raise their 8-year-old son, Alexei. Peter kidnapped Alexei and sent Eudoxia to a convent. Peter then set up 14 torture chambers to get confessions from the Streltsy. Doctors revived prisoners who passed out, so the torture could continue. After a month, Peter ordered mass executions. He hanged 200 men along Moscow's walls, 6 at each gate, and 144 more in the Red Square. Others were beheaded, often by the boyars themselves to prove their loyalty. Near his half-sister Sophia's home, Peter hanged 196 rebels outside her window and left their bodies to rot throughout the winter to scare her. The Streltsy, as an elite force and a social class, were wiped out. Part 3. The Architect. When Peter returned to Moscow from Europe, officials and boyars rushed to greet him. But then he surprised them. He pulled out a razor and shaved off their beards. In Russia, beards were seen as sacred and a sign of manhood. Many thought shaving was a sin. Peter, who had no facial hair except for a mustache, believed they looked old-fashioned and silly to Europeans. He wanted Russians to look modern. Soon, Peter made shaving a law. Only priests and peasants could keep their beards. Others had to shave or pay a special tax. Men who paid wore a medal to show it. Few dared show up before Peter with a beard. If he saw one, he sometimes yanked out the hairs or shaved the man himself. Peter also changed how Russians dressed. Russia's boyars traditionally wore long robes and tall hats, but Peter thought they looked outdated. He ordered them to wear shorter, Western-style clothes. At parties, he would even cut off their wide sleeves with scissors, joking that they got in the way. Soon, it too became law. Boyars and officials had to dress like Europeans. Peter updated the calendar too. Russians used the Byzantine calendar, which counted years from the world's creation in the Bible and celebrated New Year's on September 1st. When Peter came home, it was the year 7206, not 1698. In December 1699, he changed it to the Julian calendar. Starting January 1st, it would be the year 1700, just like in Europe. Peter also reformed currency. Before, people used foreign coins or tiny pieces of silver called kopecks. After visiting England's Royal Mint, Peter made official, reliable coins made of copper, silver, and gold. He even introduced the ruble, worth 100 kopecks. In 3 years, 9 million rubles were in circulation. In early 1700, the war against Sweden that Augustus and Peter talked about began. Augustus's Saxon army attacked Livonia and tried to capture Riga. At the same time, Denmark took over Sweden's ally, Holstein Gottorp. Peter could not join just yet. He had to finish a peace deal with the Ottoman Empire, which he did in July. On August 17th, Peter declared war and marched towards Ingria, a strip of land on the Baltic Sea that Russia had lost to Sweden in 1617. Sweden's young king, Charles XII, fought back fast. He outmaneuvered the Danish army and fleet, and landed troops near Copenhagen. Denmark quickly made peace, just 1 day before Peter declared war. Charles and 10,000 Swedes then sailed to Estonia in October to relieve Riga, but Augustus had already pulled back his army. Meanwhile, 40,000 Russians were attacking Narva. On November 29th, Peter left Narva and put a French officer in charge, believing that Charles would not attack. But the next day, Charles's outnumbered army struck during a snowstorm. The Russian army panicked and ran. The Swedes captured many officers and cannons. After Narva, many Russians feared Charles would march straight to Moscow. But Charles turned south to fight Augustus instead. Peter used this time to rebuild. He trained new soldiers in Western ways, and they learned how to shoot in volleys, charge and retreat in groups, and use cannons properly. Peter gave them green uniforms and imported modern muskets from England. However, the army still had problems with supplies and leadership, as running the army was a bureaucratic nightmare. In 1702, Peter sent Boris Sheremetev to fight the Swedes left behind to garrison Livonia. In January, Sheremetev crushed the Swedes at Rostiffer. He later destroyed the rest of their army at Homoshav in the summer. These victories helped Russia take key cities in the region like Notoborg, Dorpat, and Narva. Among the places captured was Nyanskans, a Swedish fort on the Neva River by the Baltic Sea. The land was wet, swampy, and often flooded when winds blew in water. But Peter saw a prosperous future for the area. In 1703, he tore down Nyanskans and picked Hare Island to build the Peter and Paul Fortress. After 5 months, the workers, using only basic tools like shovels and pickaxes, finished building the fort. Building in the area was dangerous. Sweden still had a strong army, and Russia did not officially control the land. But Peter did not worry. That summer, he found Kotlin Island and built a small sea fort there to guard the region's waters. Then, he started planning a new city, St. Petersburg. Peter wanted St. Petersburg to be Russia's main port. He cut taxes for foreign traders and diverted trade away from Arkhangelsk. He brought in an Italian architect, Domenico Cezzini, to design the city in a simple Dutch style. Building the city was hard. Most workers were peasants and ethnic minorities. They had to hammer wood into the swamp, carry heavy stones, and dig canals with simple tools. Many, perhaps as much as 30,000 people, died from hunger, disease, or exhaustion as a result. Supplies also ran short, so ships had to bring in stone to be let into the city. And stealing even small pieces of wood became a crime. Some called St. Petersburg a city built on bones. Still, despite the tough conditions, Peter loved his new window to the west, and made it Russia's capital city in 1712. Peter faced more than building St. Petersburg. He also faced major revolts. In 1705, a monk and a Streltsy musketeer led an uprising in Astrakhan. They were angry at the government and feared Russian women would be forced to marry Germans. General Sheremetev retook the city in 1706. A year later, Don Cossack leader Kondraty Polavin started a larger rebellion with around 100,000 men. But his forces were scattered and poorly organized. The government quickly crushed them. From 1704 to 1711, the Bashkir people also rose up in the Volga region. While this happened, a bigger threat came from Sweden. In 1706, Charles defeated Peter's ally, Augustus, forcing him out of the war. In 1708, Charles marched 44,000 men into Russia, heading for Moscow. Peter told his troops to burn crops and towns to stop the Swedes. Russian generals Sheremetev, Menshikov, and their Cossack ally Ivan Mazepa used fast hit-and-run hacks to slow Charles down. In October, Russian troops destroyed a vital Swedish supply convoy at Lesnaya. Charles was forced to turn south to Ukraine, where Mazepa flipped sides and joined him, hoping to make an independent Cossack state. But Menshikov burned Mazepa's capital, Baturin, before the Swedes got there. Without supplies, the Swedish army froze through a brutal winter and shrank in half to 24,000 men. In summer 1709, the starving Swedes marched to Poltava. On July 8th, they attacked, but got lost and bogged down in a series of forts. Peter's army then destroyed the main Swedish army. Russia lost 4,600 men. About 9,600 Swedes were killed, wounded, or captured, and the rest of the Swedish army surrendered days later. Charles and Mazepa fled to the safety of the Ottoman Empire. Peter got upset when the Ottoman Empire gave shelter to Charles. He sent angry letters to Sultan Ahmed III, asking him to expel Charles. The letters, however, became so rude that Ahmed declared war in 1710. Peter made the mistake of trusting weak allies in Moldavia and Wallachia, and underestimated the strong Turkish army. In 1711, Peter's army ran out of food and got surrounded at the Pruth River. The Turks could have easily destroyed Peter's army, but chose peace instead. Peter signed a treaty. He gave the city of Azov back to the Turks, agreed to not get involved in Polish politics, and let Charles return to Sweden safely. Though Peter lost land, he saved his army, his skin, and his power. Even after Sweden's crushing defeat at Poltava, the war continued. In 1710, Russia took Viborg, Riga, and Tallinn. Countries like Poland, Denmark, Prussia, and Hanover then joined Russia against Sweden, looking to snatch a piece of the Swedish Empire for themselves. In 1714, Russia's navy decisively beat Sweden's navy off the Hanko Peninsula in Finland. In 1718, Charles died during a siege in Norway. His sister Ulrika Eleonora took up the throne, but abdicated in favor of her husband, Frederick of Hesse. Frederick did not give up, and between 1719 and 1721, Russia raided the Swedish coastline. On September 10, 1721, both sides signed the Treaty of Nystad. Sweden gave up Estonia, Livonia, Ingria, and parts of Karelia to Russia. Sweden lost its place as a major power, and Russia rose as the strongest country in Northern and Eastern Europe. Peter celebrated his victory in St. Petersburg and thanked God and Church. There, he was asked to become the first Emperor of all Russia. He agreed with a simple nod. Part 4. The Emperor. When the Russians invaded Livonia in the early 1700s, they attacked towns, burned homes, and took many people prisoner. One of the prisoners was a young woman named Martha Skarbonskaya. She was born around 1684 in a village near Dorpat, now in Estonia. As she grew up, she became strong, kind, and attractive. After the invasion, she worked in the home of Boris Sheremetev as a laundress. Later, Peter's friend, Alexander Menshikov, noticed Martha and took her to Moscow. In 1703, Peter met her at Menshikov's house. She had converted to the Russian Orthodox Church and changed her name to Catherine. Peter liked her right away, and she became his mistress. In 1707, Peter married her in secret. 5 years later, after they had several children, he told the public. Their official wedding took place in 1712, and it was a grand public event. Though Peter had other lovers, none of them meant as much to him as Catherine. She gave birth to 12 children, though only 2 lived, Anna and Elizabeth. Losing so many children was painful, but Catherine stayed strong. She truly loved Peter and helped him calm down during hard times. Her steady, dependable presence became a great support to the Tsar. After 20 years since the Grand Embassy began, Peter wanted to visit Western Europe a second time. Setting out in 1716, he did not wear a disguise like last time. He was now a well-known and powerful ruler. He traveled openly to improve his health and build stronger ties with other countries. His doctors sent him to Bad Pyrmont, a small town in Germany known for its healing waters. While traveling, he also arranged a marriage between his niece, Catherine Ivanovna, and Duke Karl Leopold of Mecklenburg. The wedding took place in April. In 1717, Peter planned to go to France. But the France he wanted to see had changed. King Louis XIV had died in 1715. His young great-grandson, Louis XV, became king at age 5. Louis's granduncle, Philippe II, the Duke of Orleans, ruled as his regent. Still, Peter wanted to meet him. The French were unsure how to host Peter, but they agreed. Peter and his entourage were hard to please. Peter himself declined grand receptions with luxurious dinners, preferring to eat simpler meals. In May, he reached the Louvre Palace. He greeted the regent warmly, but broke protocol by walking ahead of him. He later met the young King of France, picking him up and hugging him, and jokingly called him a mighty man in a letter. Peter spent weeks exploring Paris. He met workers, visited hospitals and schools. Scholars at the Sorbonne University gave him ideas to unite the Catholic and Orthodox churches. The Academy of Sciences made him an honorary member. He asked many questions and impressed the French with his restless energy and plain dress. After visiting Louis and Philippe once again, Peter said his goodbyes and set off for Russia in June. Peter returned to St. Petersburg on October 11, 1717. But trouble was waiting. His son, Alexei, was not the kind of heir Peter wanted. Born in 1690, Alexei was raised by his mother, Eudoxia. Like his mother, Alexei liked peace, religion, and old Russian traditions. Peter wanted a strong heir, so he gave Alexei strict teachers and sent him off to war. But Alexei disliked fighting and avoided his duties. In 1711, Alexei married Charlotte of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel, a kind German princess. Though, Alexei proved to be an absent husband, as he ruined their finances getting drunk on alcohol. They had a son, Peter Alexeyevich, but Charlotte died soon after in 1715. After Charlotte died, Peter wrote Alexei a harsh letter. He said Alexei was lazy, weak, and unfit to rule. Peter warned that he would name a new heir if Alexei did not change for the better. Afraid, Alexei gave up his claim to the throne. But Peter was not satisfied with this response. He gave Alexei a final ultimatum: step up as heir or become a monk. Instead, Alexei fled to Austria. Holy Roman Emperor Charles VI agreed to hide Alexei. Peter sent spies to find him, and they cornered him in southern Italy. Peter Tolstoy, a Russian diplomat, convinced Alexei to return in early 1718. But it was a trap. When he returned, Peter put Alexei on trial and disinherited him. Under pressure, Alexei confessed that he hated his father and would undo his work if he became Tsar. Alexei was sentenced to death by both the clerical and secular court, and he was tortured to wring out more confessions. However, a few days before his execution date, Alexei died on June 26, likely because of his grievous wounds. Peter grieved, but believed his son's death was necessary to protect Russia. After winning the Battle of Poltava, Peter had more time to focus on modernizing Russia. In 1708, to better fund the war with Sweden, Peter divided Russia into 8 large provinces to raise money and soldiers. In 1711, Peter created the governing Senate. The Senate managed finances, justice, and administration while Peter was away. In 1718, Peter added 9 new offices called collegiums. Each college focused on areas like taxes, war, the navy, trade, foreign policy, and law. Peter's trusted friends and foreign experts ran them. Peter also wanted people to earn their positions. In 1722, he created the Table of Ranks, a hierarchy of 14 jobs in both the military, the imperial court, and government. Any man could climb the ranks through hard work. Reaching a certain level made a man a noble, and higher levels passed that status to his children. Running a bigger government and military needed much more money. By 1724, the government was collecting 5 times more taxes than in 1680. In 1718, Peter replaced land-based taxes with a poll tax, where every lower-class man was taxed the same hefty amount. This blurred the line between serfdom and slavery, making most peasants legally the same. Peter also wanted Russia to produce more goods at home. He raised taxes on imports and helped set up factories for things like silk and glass. Mining grew especially fast. In the Ural Mountains, Peter sponsored skilled workers like Nikita Demidov to build many iron foundries. By the end of Peter's reign, Russia was making more pig iron than England and Sweden. Peter also changed how the Russian Orthodox Church was ran. After the death of Patriarch Adrian in 1700, Peter left the seat empty. He did not want a powerful church leader slowing down his reforms. Instead, he worked with Theophan Prokopovich, a Ukrainian monk trained in the West. In 1721, Theophan helped Peter create a new law called the Spiritual Regulation. It replaced the Patriarch with a group called the Most Holy Synod, which ran the church like a government office. Though it made the church more organized and centralized under Russia's monarchs, it also made it weaker in its power and influence. When the Treaty of Nystad was signed on September 10, 1721, Russia was finally at peace after 21 long years of war. But while the celebrations were still happening, Peter was busy planning a new campaign, this time in the south, against Safavid Persia. Peter had always dreamed of connecting Russia to the riches of China and India. China was resistant to trade, and northern sea routes were blocked by Arctic ice. To reach India, Peter looked for a land route through Central Asia and Persia. In 1716, he sent Alexander Cherkassy to find such a route. But it ended badly. The Khan of Khiva, in modern-day Uzbekistan, tricked Cherkasy into splitting up his men, which allowed the Khivans to destroy them easily. Peter did not give up, however, and in 1717 he sent Artemy Volinsky to Persia. At first, things went badly. Volinsky was arrested because the Safavids had heard about Cherkasy. Still, he managed to make a trade deal, and Russian merchants soon entered Persia. In 1721, a Caucasian tribe attacked a town with Russian traders. Peter used this as a reason to invade. A year later, news came that the Safavid Shah was recently toppled by rebels, and in the power vacuum, the Ottoman Turks were seeing an opportunity to take land. Peter had to move fast. He and his wife Catherine led an army 60,000 strong to the Caspian Sea and captured the key city of Derbent. Peter planned to take Baku and hoped to ally with local Christians in Tbilisi. But storms sank his supply ships, and many soldiers grew sick. After taking Baku, the Russians retreated. In 1723, Russia and Persia signed the Treaty of St. Petersburg. Russia gained land in the Caucasus region, but had to give it up in the 1730s after heavy losses trying to garrison in the area's harsh climate. By the time Peter and Catherine got back to Moscow, the Emperor of Russia was 50 years old. Russia's previous monarchs rarely lived beyond that age, and Peter's life of hard drinking had surely hurt his health. He began thinking more about Russia's future and who would rule after him. Peter wanted to use marriage to build strong ties with other countries. He hoped his daughter Elizabeth would marry a French prince, or even the young Louis XV, but the plan fell through. Elizabeth stayed single. His other daughter, Anna, married Charles Frederick of Holstein, the nephew of Sweden's late Charles XII. In 1728, they had a son named Karl Ulrich Peter. Peter did not plan for either daughter to rule. He had once hoped his grandson, Peter Alexeyevich, would lead Russia, but the boy's father was Alexei, whom Peter had condemned. So, Peter looked more to his wife Catherine, who had always stood by him. In 1722, he made a new law saying rulers could choose their own heir. He personally crowned Catherine as the first Empress of Russia in 1724, though he did not name her as his heir. By late 1724, Peter's health got worse. He had frequent bladder infections and kidney stones. By early February 1725, he was bedridden. In the afternoon of February 8th, it was said that he asked for a pen and paper. He began to write, "Give all to," but the effort was so great that he asked for Anna to help him dictate his will. But before she could arrive, the emperor sank into a coma and never woke again. Peter died at age 52 and had ruled for 43 years. When he began his reign, Europe saw Russia as a backward, isolated frontier. They did not even refer to Russia as Russia, but instead its old name, Muscovy. When he died, however, Europe was made well aware of the new, powerful, and modern empire in the East. Though it still took a few more decades for Europe as a whole to drop the name Muscovy and formally recognize the Tsars of Russia as emperors and empresses. People had differing views of Peter following his death. Some saw him as a godlike figure or a biblical hero on a mission to bring light to a dark land. Others saw him as the Antichrist, a harsh tyrant who destroyed Russian traditions and forced foreign ideas on the country. and paid for it with the blood, sweat, and tears of tens of thousands. In many ways, both are true. But regardless of how he is viewed, there is no denying that the Russia of today would be truly alien if it were not for Peter.